They bulldozed my track on a Tuesday morning, didn't call, didn't knock, didn't even leave a note, just showed up with machines big enough to erase 15 years of memories in a few hours, and by the time I got there, it was already gone. I remember standing there with my truck door still open, engine running, like somehow if I didn't turn it off this might still be reversible, like I'd wake up and the oval would still be there, packed dirt, tire marks, that one stubborn patch near turn 3 that never held moisture right no matter how much we watered it. But no, it was all flattened, smoothed out like it had never existed, like we'd all imagined it. And I gotta tell you, I've seen things get taken away before. I've lost jobs, I've lost people. But there's something about watching a place disappear, a place that held other people's memories too, that hits different. It sits heavier in your chest. My name's Caleb Mercer, and that track, it wasn't some official racetrack with grandstands and sponsors and banners. It was just land behind my property out in Red Hollow County, a stretch of dirt my dad leveled out back in the early 2000s when gas was cheap and people still fixed their own engines on weekends. It started small, just a few neighbors running laps, but over time it became something else. Saturdays you'd have kids barely tall enough to see over the steering wheel wobbling through their first laps while their dads jogged alongside yelling, "Ease into it, don't fight the wheel." And Sundays you'd get the older guys, grease-stained hands, arguing about timing curves like it was religion. It wasn't fancy, but it was alive, and people showed up, week after week, year after year. There was this one guy, Earl, older than most of us, always wore the same sun-faded cap that said Dayton 79. Never smiled much, but he'd stay late helping kids fix whatever they broke. Didn't matter whose kid it was, he just showed up. And then there was Lila, ran the snack stand out of a converted horse trailer, made the best fried pies you've ever had. I swear half the reason people came out was for those pies. It was a community, you know, the kind that doesn't really announce itself. It just forms, slowly, quietly, until one day you realize it matters more than you thought. And then one morning, it didn't. Across the fence line, they'd been building that theme park for about a year. Big operation, steel frames rising up like skeletons against the sky, cranes swinging overhead, banners everywhere promising limitless thrills and seamless guest experience. All that polished language that sounds good until you look a little closer. We'd heard rumors, sure, that they were expanding, that they needed more parking, better traffic flow, but nobody ever came to talk to us, not really. A few survey stakes showed up months earlier, some guys in clean boots took measurements, nodded to each other, left, and we figured, all right, they're mapping things out, that's normal. What we didn't figure was they'd just decide for us. I walked up to what used to be turn 1, or where it should have been, and I could still see faint outlines in the dirt where the curve used to rise slightly, like a ghost of it. And that's when I heard boots crunching behind me. I turned, and there he was, hard hat tilted back, sunglasses on. The kind of guy who carries himself like the land already belongs to him whether it does or not. "You Mercer?" he asked, not unfriendly, just efficient. "Yeah," I said, looking past him at the machines. "What the hell is this?" He didn't hesitate. "Land leveling. Future parking expansion. You're adjacent to a commercial zone now, so." "You tore up my track." He paused for half a second, like recalibrating language. "Recreational dirt areas reduce premium perception," he said, almost like he'd practiced it, like it came from a slide deck somewhere. I actually laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so clean, so detached. "Premium perception," I repeated, looking back at the dirt where kids used to stall out learning how to shift. He shrugged. "Look, man, this whole corridor's being upgraded. Better traffic flow, higher capacity. It's good for the county." "For who?" He didn't answer that, just adjusted his gloves. "If you've got concerns, you can contact the development office," he said, already turning away, conversation over in his mind. And that was it. That was the whole explanation for wiping out 15 years of something people actually cared about. I stayed there longer than I should have, long enough for the machines to shut down, long enough for the dust to settle into that weird quiet that only happens after something loud disappears. At one point Earl pulled up beside me, engine rattling like always, rolled down his window, looked out at the flattened ground, didn't say anything for a while. "They didn't even ask, huh?" he finally said. "Nope." He nodded slowly, like he already knew the answer before asking. "Figures." Lila showed up later too, brought coffee like she always did on weekends, except there was no one to serve it to. She stood there, holding those paper cups, staring at nothing, then just set them down on the hood of my truck and said, "What are we supposed to do now?" I didn't have an answer for her. Not then. That night, I couldn't sleep. Kept seeing that empty stretch of dirt, kept hearing echoes that weren't there anymore. Engines, laughter, arguments, all of it just gone. And I kept replaying that phrase in my head, premium perception, like somehow that justified it, like memories were just clutter in the way of something shinier. Around midnight, I grabbed my jacket and drove out again. The site was quiet, construction lights still glowing in the distance, and I followed what used to be the outer edge of the track until it merged with this new dirt road they'd carved through, wide and smooth, leading downhill. I hadn't paid much attention to it before, but now, without the track there, it stood out, like a scar cutting straight through where the heart of everything used to be. I walked it slowly, hands in my pockets, kicking at loose gravel, and it curved down toward the backside of the theme park, where this massive exit ramp had been laid out, fresh asphalt, painted lines not even worn in yet. It was designed to move people fast, you could tell, funnel thousands of cars out after closing, clean, efficient, seamless, just like their banners promised. And standing there, looking at that road, something started to click. Not all at once, more like a memory surfacing from somewhere I hadn't visited in a while. A conversation, years back. Paperwork. Delays. I leaned against the guardrail, staring at the ramp, and muttered to myself, "No way." Because I remembered something they clearly didn't. And for the first time since that morning, I wasn't just angry anymore. I was curious. I didn't head home right away that night. I just stood there a while longer, leaning on that guardrail, looking down at the exit ramp like it might say something back if I stared hard enough. It sounds strange, I know, but there are moments when a place holds onto information, like it remembers things people forget. And that ramp, that wasn't just asphalt. That was a solution to a problem they'd had years ago, a problem I'd been closer to than they probably realized. Back when the theme park project first got announced, most of us out in Red Hollow didn't think much of it. Developers come and go, plans fall through, funding dries up. You hear about big ideas all the time that never make it past a press release. But these folks, they were different. They had money, serious money, and they had backing from the county, which meant things were actually moving. Surveyors came through, environmental teams, traffic engineers, people with clipboards and polished boots, asking questions about flood zones and soil density and road access. And that's where things got messy for them. See, Red Hollow wasn't built for volume. We've got narrow roads that twist through hills, blind turns, a couple of old bridges that probably should have been replaced 10 years ago. It works fine when it's just locals, but you start talking thousands of cars in and out in a short window. That's a different story. The county flagged it early, said if they wanted operational approval, they needed a solid crowd dispersal plan, multiple exit routes, redundancy, contingency paths in case something went wrong. I remember sitting in one of those county meetings, not because I had any stake in the park, but because they sent notices out to nearby landowners, and my dad always told me, if someone's making decisions near your land, you show up. So I did. And I remember one of the engineers, guy named Travis maybe, standing up with this big map, pointing out choke points, talking about traffic modeling, how one blocked exit could back everything up for miles. At one point, someone from the development team asked, "What's the easiest way to meet the requirement?" And Travis pointed, right at a strip of land that cut across the edge of our property. I remember that moment clear as day, because my dad leaned over and whispered, "That's ours." Turns out, that strip, just a narrow run of land along the lower edge, was perfectly positioned to create a secondary exit route. Wide enough, straight enough, and it connected to a county-maintained road that could handle overflow traffic. Problem was, it wasn't theirs to use. So they came to us. Not the polished supervisor type like the guy I met that morning. No, back then they sent someone smoother, someone who knew how to talk to people. His name was Daniel Hargrove, I think. Mid-40s, clean suit even in the middle of a dusty site, smile that never quite reached his eyes but still made you feel like he was listening. He sat at our kitchen table with my dad and me, laid out the situation real simple. "We don't need to buy the land," he said, hands folded, calm, measured. "Just temporary access during construction and initial operations. Once we stabilize traffic patterns, we'll reassess. My dad didn't trust him. I could tell. He kept asking questions, slow and deliberate. How temporary? Initial operational phase, Hargrove said. Standard practice. That ain't an answer, my dad replied. Hargrove smiled a little tighter. 5 years, with review options. And that's how they got it. A temporary easement, documented, signed, stamped. They paid a modest fee, nothing life-changing, but fair enough at the time. The idea was simple. They'd use that route as part of their exit system while the park got established, and then later they'd figure out something more permanent. But here's the thing about temporary. People treat it like it expires on its own. It doesn't. Paperwork doesn't forget. People do. After my dad passed a few years later, a lot of that stuff got boxed up, filed away in an old metal cabinet out in the workshop. I handled most of the land matters after that. But honestly, life gets busy. You don't go digging through old agreements unless you have a reason. And that night, standing there looking at that exit ramp, I had a reason. I drove back to the house, went straight to the workshop, flipped on that harsh overhead light that makes everything look a little more real than you want it to, and pulled open the cabinet. It still smelled faintly like oil and dust, same as always. Took me a while, shuffling through folders, old receipts, faded maps, but then I found it. Thick paper, county seal, signatures still crisp. Temporary easement agreement. 5 years, with review options, never renewed. I just stood there holding it, feeling something shift in my chest. Not anger this time. Not exactly. Something quieter, sharper. Because this wasn't about revenge in the way people usually think about it. I wasn't looking to hurt them just to hurt them. I just realized they'd built something that depended on a piece of land they didn't fully control anymore. And they'd forgotten to ask if that was still okay. The next morning, I got dressed like I had somewhere important to be, because I did. Drove into the district office, same building where those meetings happened years ago, same worn steps, same fluorescent lighting inside. There was a young clerk at the front desk, barely looked up when I walked in. I need to file a termination notice, I said, placing the document on the counter. She glanced at it, then at me, then back at it. For an easement? Yeah. She flipped through a couple pages, eyebrows pulling together slightly. This is still active? It was, I said. There's a certain kind of silence that happens when someone realizes something's about to cause a problem. Not loud, not dramatic, just still. She picked up the phone, called someone in the back, spoke in a lower voice. A few minutes later, an older guy came out, glasses low on his nose. Looked like he'd been doing this job longer than he wanted to admit. You understand what this affects? He asked me. I do. He studied me for a second, like he was trying to decide if I was bluffing, then nodded. All right, he said, reaching for a stamp. And that was it. No yelling, no scene, no threats. Just ink on paper. Consequences, they came quicker than I expected. First it was subtle. A couple of temporary barricades showed up near the exit ramp. Nothing major, just cones and portable signs. Then more appeared, reflective barriers, redirect arrows, notices about temporary traffic adjustments. Within a couple days, that whole secondary exit route was shut down, completely unusable. All that traffic, it had to go somewhere else. And there was only one real alternative. A narrow county road that twisted through the hills like it had been designed before anyone imagined this kind of volume. It worked fine for locals, like I said, but now you had hundreds, then thousands of cars trying to push through it, especially on weekends when the park started its soft opening phase. The first Saturday, I drove out there just to see. I didn't even make it halfway before hitting the line. Cars. Everywhere. Engines idling, people getting out, stretching, checking their phones, kids whining in the back seats. It wasn't moving, not really. Just inching forward in this slow, painful crawl. I rolled down my window, listened for a bit. You could hear frustration building, little pockets of it here and there. How long we been sitting? Someone asked from a truck ahead. 40 minutes, another voice answered. A woman walked past my truck, shaking her head, muttering, "This is ridiculous." And this was just the beginning. Inside the park, from what I heard later, it wasn't much better. Schedules got thrown off because people couldn't leave on time. Parking lots backed up because there was nowhere for cars to go. Staff scrambling to direct traffic that didn't want to be directed. I saw clips online that night. People posting videos, tagging the park, complaining about being stuck for hours after what was supposed to be a fun day. Navigation apps started glitching too. trying to reroute everyone through roads that weren't meant to handle that kind of load. It turned into this ripple effect, not one big failure, but 1,000 small ones stacking up on top of each other. And the thing is, none of it was dramatic on its own. No explosions, no disasters, just pressure, building. By the second weekend, it got worse. Fire safety inspectors started showing up, asking questions about evacuation times, emergency access. You can't run a place like that without meeting certain standards, and suddenly those standards weren't being met anymore. Investors started getting nervous. I heard that through a guy I know who does electrical work on larger sites. Said there were meetings happening behind closed doors, a lot of talk about operational risk and public perception, the same phrase they'd used to justify tearing up my track. Funny how that works. Lila called me one evening, said she'd seen online reviews, people talking about never coming back, about how the park wasn't ready, how it was a mess. You think this is because of, she asked, careful with her words. I looked out toward where the track used to be, now just a blank stretch of dirt catching the last light of the day. Yeah, I said. It is. There was a pause on the line. Good, she said quietly. Earl didn't say much when I saw him, just gave me that same slow nod as before, like he understood more than he needed to say. 2 weeks after I filed that notice, I got a call. Didn't recognize the number, almost didn't answer, but something told me to pick it up. Mr. Mercer? A voice said, controlled but tired. Yeah. This is Daniel Hargrove. We spoke a few years ago. I leaned back in my chair, let that name settle for a second. Yeah, I said. I remember. There was a brief silence, not awkward, just heavy with everything that had happened since that kitchen table conversation. I'd like to meet, he said finally. In person. I glanced out the window again, toward that empty space where engines used to scream through dust. All right, I said. Come by. And just like that, things were about to shift again. Hargrove showed up the next afternoon, and I'll give him this. He didn't bring a convoy, didn't send assistants ahead of him, didn't try to dress the moment up like it was anything other than what it was. Just a single black SUV pulling up slow on the gravel, dust kicking up behind it, engine cutting off like it knew better than to interrupt what was coming next. I was already outside when he stepped out, leaning against the same fence line that used to separate my land from the track, though now there wasn't much left to separate. He looked different than I remembered, not older exactly, but worn down, like someone had been slowly sanding the edges off him over the past couple weeks. The smile was still there, technically, but it didn't land the same. Caleb, he said, walking up, offering a hand. I looked at it for a second, then shook it. Firm, not friendly. Daniel. We stood there for a moment, both of us taking in the empty stretch behind me, the flattened dirt, the absence of something that used to be loud enough to fill the whole valley. He nodded toward it. This was the track. I said. Another pause. He let out a breath, like he'd rehearsed a different version of this conversation and decided to scrap it. We made a mistake, he said. Simple. Direct. No corporate phrasing this time. I tilted my head slightly. You made a few. He gave a small, tired chuckle. Fair. We started walking along the edge of the property, not really heading anywhere, just moving, like it helped keep the conversation from getting stuck. I'm not here to argue about what happened, he continued. We've already had those conversations internally, and I won't insult you by pretending it was handled well. That's one way to put it. He glanced over at me. We're in a difficult position now. I didn't respond. Let him sit in that for a second. The secondary exit route, he said, was more critical than some of our newer teams realized. The assumption was continuity. That assumption cost you, I said. It did, he admitted. And it's costing us more every day it stays closed. We reached the point where that dirt road dipped down toward the exit ramp in the distance. Cars still crawling along the alternative route beyond the hills. Even from here you could see the slow, uneven movement of traffic like a clogged artery. He followed my gaze. We're getting flagged by safety inspectors. Response times are outside acceptable thresholds. If something goes wrong. He didn't finish the sentence. It already did, I said quietly. He nodded. Yes. There was no defensiveness in him now, no attempt to spin it. Just reality. So, he said after a moment, turning slightly toward me, we'd like to fix this. I crossed my arms. Fix what exactly? All of it, he said. The track. The damage. The relationship. I raised an eyebrow. That's a big list. It is. And you think you can just put it back? No, he said, honest enough not to pretend. Not exactly as it was. But we can rebuild it. Proper grading, safety barriers, lighting if you want it, structured events, community days. I held up a hand. Stop. He stopped. You're still talking like this is yours to design, I said. Like you're doing me a favor. He exhaled slowly, nodded once. All right. Then tell me what this looks like to you. And there it was. That shift. The moment where the balance changes, not because someone forced it, but because they realized they don't have another option. I pushed off the fence and walked a few steps ahead, looking out over the land, picturing it the way it used to be, the curve of the oval, the way the late afternoon light hit turn 2 just right, the sound of engines echoing off the hills. If it comes back, I said, it comes back the way it was. Same layout, same lines. You don't smooth it out to make it look nicer for your guests. You don't brand it. You don't turn it into an attraction. He listened without interrupting. This wasn't part of your park, I continued. It was part of this community. That doesn't change just because you built something next to it. He nodded slowly. Okay. Second, I said, turning to face him, you put it in writing that this land, this space, stays recognized as community recreational use. Not temporary. Not subject to review. Permanent. That's doable, he said, though I could see him calculating the implications. And third, I paused for a second, letting it land before I said it. If you want that exit route back open, you pay for it. Not a one-time fee. Ongoing. You're using land that isn't yours to keep your operation running smoothly. That has a cost. He didn't answer right away. Not because he was resisting, but because he was thinking. I could almost hear the math happening in his head, the projections, the risk assessments, the meetings he'd have to go back and report to. Rebuilding a dirt track, paying a land use fee, formalizing community rights. None of that was in their original plan. But neither was gridlock. Neither was failing safety inspections. Neither was the kind of public backlash they were starting to see. Finally, he looked up at me. If we agree to all of that, he said, you'll reinstate the easement? Yeah, I said. I will. Another pause. Then he extended his hand again. Then we have a deal. This time, I didn't hesitate. We shook on it right there. No cameras, no contracts yet. Just two people standing on a piece of land that had suddenly become a lot more valuable than either side expected. The paperwork took a couple weeks to finalize. Lawyers got involved, language got tightened, numbers got negotiated, but the core of it didn't change. They agreed to everything. And to their credit, they followed through. Reconstruction started not long after. Different machines this time, different purpose. Instead of flattening, they were shaping, rebuilding the oval from memory and old measurements I'd kept, bringing back the curves, the slight imperfections that made it what it was. I was out there most days, watching, occasionally stepping in when something didn't feel right. Earl showed up too, of course, leaned on the fence like he always did. Except now there was something in his expression I hadn't seen since before all this started, a quiet kind of satisfaction. Told you it wasn't over, he muttered one afternoon. I smirked. You didn't tell me anything. He shrugged. Didn't have to. Lila came back once the ground was ready. Parked that same old trailer in nearly the exact same spot. Handed me a fried pie without saying a word, like no time had passed at all. Opening day, if you can call it that, wasn't announced. No banners, no grand reopening. People just heard. Word spread the way it always had, through conversations, texts, someone telling someone else, and by that weekend, there were cars lined up again. Not stuck this time, just waiting their turn. Engines fired up, dust kicked into the air, kids laughing, adults arguing about things that didn't really matter but felt important in the moment. And standing there, hearing it all come back, I realized something I hadn't fully understood before. They didn't just rebuild a track. They acknowledged something. That not everything can be measured in revenue, and not everything that looks small is actually insignificant. As for the park, once the easement was reinstated, traffic smoothed out almost immediately. The exit ramp flowed the way it was designed to, cars moving clean and steady out into the main roads. Reviews improved, operations stabilized, investors relaxed. From the outside, it probably looked like everything worked out. And maybe it did. But here's the thing I still think about sometimes, late at night, when it's quiet again and the dust has settled. None of this would have happened if they'd just asked in the first place. If someone had walked up, knocked on my door, sat down like Hargrove did years ago, and said, "Hey, we need to expand. How do we do this without wiping out what matters to you?" We probably would have figured something out. No shutdown, no chaos, no standoff, just the conversation. Instead, it took pressure. It took consequences. It took them losing control of something they thought they had locked in to realize they didn't. And I don't know how to feel about that, honestly. Part of me is glad it worked out the way it did. The track's back, the community's stronger, and yeah, I'm not gonna lie, there's a certain satisfaction in knowing they had to come back and meet me on my terms. But another part of me wonders what that says about how things get done now. Do people only listen when there's leverage? Do you have to let something break before anyone bothers to fix it the right way? I don't have a clean answer for that. Maybe you do. So here's what I want to know. If you were in my place, would you have done the same thing? Shut it down, forced their hand, made them pay attention the hard way? Or would you have tried to work it out before it ever got that far? And on the other side, if you were them, building something big, something expensive, would you have seen the track as just dirt in the way? Or something worth protecting? Let me know what you think. And if you're into stories like this, real situations, messy decisions, no clear heroes or villains, go ahead and hit like, subscribe, and stick around. Because sometimes, the smallest piece of land can hold the most leverage.